Hi, everybody. Steve Cady here at Bowling Green State University with our Doctorate in Organization Development and Change program. We also have our Master in Organization Development and Change program, and it's our Symposia series. And Arielle, hi, Arielle. She's got some cool stuff. So she did a couple things as part of our Change 2024 Think Tank series, which was really great. And then we've talked after that. Your concepts, Arielle, are just really fascinating. I think they've been helpful to me as I think about, living systems and different ways of thinking about what this regenerative approach is and so forth. So it's been really helpful to me. I find it just fascinating. So that what we'll do today is we will kick off with you sharing, and then we'll have some discussion, and then we'll follow kind of a format like that. Jillian is here. She's our producer director. Hi, Jillian. Thank you so much for helping us get organized and get everything going today. Thank you for that. And Teo is our associate director, and he helps with making sure that we're getting the marketing and getting everybody coming and things like that. So thank you, Teo, for that. And then we have some good friends here and so forth. So Arielle, why don't I think what about you and your background would you like us to know about you as we get started on this? What about that has kind of influenced where you are today and the topic for today?
Yeah. So hello, thank you for having me. My name is Arielle Sullivan, and I hail from the field of OD. So I grew up with a father who did OD that worked with many of the people in the room. And so I was exposed to the concepts and started off my career like working in org effectiveness in a large corporation, doing all of the change services from culture to leadership, effectiveness and alignment to change management to org design to large group interventions, and really got, I did my master's at Pepperdine in 2014 to 2016. Moved to Seattle in 2018 and started doing external consulting. And then in 2020, something happened where I started interfacing with the regenerative movement. And it was during COVID, and I found myself in these Zoom rooms with a lot of people that were talking like OD people, but they were not OD people. But there was a lot of resonance and a lot of synergy. And so I did my thesis at Pepperdine on OD practitioner values and the impact on environmental behavior. Like I didn't have the language for it at the time, but there was a deep calling in my heart of this like sense of love for the earth and some experiences that I had had in my life. And I kind of had this idea. I'm like, well, if we feel that we are a part of the earth, like, don't we want to like take care of it and protect it? And so I started researching and connecting with other OD folks who were doing that type of work in the field. And that was before I even had the language for regenerative anything. And it was before it was really a field. Like it was almost taking off at that time around 2013, 2014. A lot of different thought leaders that I'm reading about are kind of tracing back on a similar timeline. So this is kind of newly emergent. And it is very congruent with OD in terms of systems and thrivability, because OD is all about the whole self. There's a gestalt to our being, to the systems that we work in, a non-linearity around that, and a desire to improve and like effectiveness, but also like health. And that's really, really similar to the regenerative philosophy and movement. And so yeah, I got really excited about it, and I started just learning as much as I can in the last 5 years, and trying to apply it to the projects that I work on. So I feel as though I'm a bridge builder between the OD field and the regenerative communities that I'm discovering out there, and they're all over the place, and they're all slightly different. And so I hope to kind of introduce you to this as a potential place of interest where you can find synergy for yourself and your own work. So that was a long introduction.
Oh, that's great. No, I think it's important because it connects to the topic, that you're going to share with us. So why don't you bring up your slides and take us through your topic? I think you plan on pausing at certain points for some discussion as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Arielle,
feel
are you okay with sort of interruption, or would you prefer we put it in the chat? What works for you?
I actually would love it to be a conversation. So if you want, raise your hand if at any point you want to interject and ask something. You can put it in the chat too. I'll have both up, so I'll be tracking. I'll try to do my best to track, but if I don't see your comment, please feel free to bring yourself in. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, I call this regenerative systems change. And not a lot of people are using this term, but it's kind of it's what I'm finding it for me, because I'm doing systems change regeneratively, kind of merging these two things together. And a lot of it is around aligning leaders strategically in a direction towards regenerative futures. And so when I say, we'll talk a lot more about what that means, but I'm very intentional about the types of projects that I take on. And like they are pointing us in a direction where we're like wanting to evolve towards. Like I'm not perpetuating things that are broken, but shifting systems for a higher order of evolution. And that is like a deep, deep calling on like why I'm here, why I feel like I was born into the family that I was, and like what my dharma is in my professional world. Hold on a second. My slides are not advancing, so I'm just going to see if I can share these in a different way. Here we go. All right, can you see my slides? Okay.
Yes.
All right, so this is just like, I spoke a little bit to this, but like, I think lineage is important to better understand like where I'm coming from and like who I am. So yeah, on the right, you have a kind of like, yeah, my background and my education and where I'm kind of consolidating all these concepts from. So, and I won't go through all of these right now, but there's just different regenerative communities that I've been weaving with the last few years. I always stay very connected to my OD community and Pepperdine folks. But I'm really, I work primarily now at the org level, but also at the trans org level in terms of weaving networks and strengthening alignment within networks. Because I believe many of the challenges that we face now are systemic, and like we can't just stay in our own organization anymore and care about our own strategy and profit and competition. Like some of the challenges and this almost like deconstruction of systems right now that we're seeing, like it's forcing us to think bigger and more broadly. And so my role as an OD practitioner is really like being able to facilitate and weave across these different systems for like greater coherence and greater alignment, in service of like, you know, all of many different conversations that are alive right now. And I do this a lot with large group. So that's also like a big part of my background, is that that was kind of my dad's Rollins shtick, was large groups interventions. And I've had a lot of experience over the last 15 years designing and facilitating large group convenings. And what's shifting now for me is that it's like trans org convenings in service of a regenerative future. These are some of the types of work that I do. So I've had my own firm for the last 6 years, and sometimes it's just working in an organization. It's actually a lot easier to contract and to like find funding to work within the walls of an organization. And what I do is I bring regenerative frameworks to the work. So I'm still doing like strategy and leadership alignment and looking at the org design and process and like kind of all some of the similar OD things you would do with leaders or with a team, but I'm now bringing in frameworks that are regenerative and using those in my work, and like hopefully working in organizations that are like interested in a regenerative future. So that's kind of 1 and 2. And number 3 here is the multi-stakeholder network convening. So this is like new in the last 5 years in terms of bringing folks together across organizations and building the fabric of the web and the effectiveness of, you know, multiple organizations like trying to work collaboratively. So just some of the things, we'll see how far we get today. Like there's so much. And like you're welcome to talk to me, reach out afterwards. But I'll definitely share like some breadcrumbs of resources that you can do your own research on, because that's what I did. I just started reading things in 2020 and I started joining things and developed my own perspective. And again, a lot of it is so congruent with what you are already learning. So we're going to talk about the case, a little bit of my perspective on the case for change, of like why I think this is important to integrate into our worlds now, and then bringing in the living systems paradigm and any implications that this has for our work and how we want to think about our work differently. And then if we have time, I'll bring in the regenerative design principles, which are principles you can weave in to how you do your work that really anchors in the regenerative philosophy and works with complexity. So yeah, we are in a really wild time to be alive right now. Like we are seeing, I think it's just like a deconstruction. It's kind of like the breakdown. It's like taking everything apart in order to like rebuild and redesign. And, and there's with AI coming online and how that's going to impact organizations and jobs across the world. And, just how technology has almost disconnected disconnected ourselves sometimes from each other, but also from like our local community, local place, local ecosystem. There's just this story of separation that Laura Storm and Giles Hutchins talk about. They wrote a book on regenerative leadership, and I would say they're like pretty OD thinking types of people. But that's part of like the story that we're living in, and we do need these new mental models to help catalyze social and cultural innovations. And we're evolving our consciousness. Like we are evolving as humans. We're waking up. We're finding love in our hearts. We're understanding that we are connected more deeply than we'd like to admit sometimes. And this is just the really ripe conditions for systems transformation. And when we're working in the system where sometimes there's like a feeling of perpetual systemic stress, when there's a lot of unknowns, and there's just how we have been relating to consumerism and exploitation of resources. And it's been very linear in terms of how we have built production lines, and we've become really good at it. But we've also been like extracting more from our ecosystems than we're working from a mindset of infinite resources, which is not the fact. And this slowly starting to catch up with us, or it's actually starting to catch up with us very quickly. It's been lurking in the underneath the surface for a while, and now we're seeing some of these larger negative unintended consequences. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but we know there's just like a lot going on. There's a lot in the field. There's a lot of instability politically, globally, economically. Natural disasters are becoming more and more frequent. And so this is a ripe opportunity to be change interventionists for higher purpose. Like this is the calling that I believe, like in times of turmoil, like who can best help shift change agents. Change agents have the skill set to help systems shift. So that's just, again, calling back to like, how do we want to be serving? How do we want to be showing up in our lives and in our work? the shift to living systems paradigm is, you know, we have looked at as an organization historically as a structure that uses power to apply forces and control movement to perform an intended action. And it's been linear production. It's been like, we can map the process, we can control the output, we can get really good at creating the widget like the same time over and over again. And this is not a bad thing. It has allowed us to be like incredibly effective, send things around the world, master logistics, fly planes, like do surgery, right? But we're also noticing that organizations are these like complex networks that are alive with like an exchange of information and intelligence. And even in an organization, like it's not always the leader at the top of the hierarchy that's influencing change. Like there are people, there are nodes, there are communities, there's folks like embedded within the organization that are playing a role in the movement and the outcomes of how things flow and what the culture is. And so this is like more of thinking about an organization as a living system, which is a holistic system capable of self-regeneration and self-maintenance that emerges from each of the unique developing members of the organization and their interdependent relationships. So again, like machine, linear cause and effect. We can control what we produce, but we require more. When you think about a car, like you need more gas from the outside to put into the car to keep it moving. It's dependent upon increased input from the outside. And you're really like controlling it for that maximum output. It's a complicated system, but it's not necessarily a complex system. So in a living systems paradigm, it's a nonlinear interaction through interdependent, diverse relationships. And they require less energy over time. So ecosystems are living systems paradigm. They know how to maintain a boundary of their own making. That is what autopoiesis means. When they've studied a cell, cells are able to maintain a boundary of their own making and like more effectively and efficiently over time. And so this is also wanting to create conditions, like being really clear about the purpose and the conditions to create some sort of flourishing output. And it's complex, it's not predictable because there are so many different interactions within this living system that are going through adaptive cycles of evolution and growth. And so if we take this mentality and we apply it to our organizations, like it's almost like a new technology that we can use when we think about change and when we work with change, because we're wanting to build things understanding that we're working in a complex adaptive system. There's also a human element to this. And yeah, I think like Alora and Rhythm is another organization that brings kind of like a system science perspective to culture. And it's really around like, how do we thrive? How do we develop into our potential? How do we honor the fact that we are each very unique and we have an individual blueprint in terms of the gifts that we bring, right? Like this is a lot of the Peter Block stuff, right? Like we're not, we no longer want to just use people to produce widgets effectively. And that's been in the field for a while, in the OD field. I think we've all, there's a general understanding around that in terms of a deeper level of contribution from an individual and a deeper level of service and purpose and growth, right? And so, yeah, just a little bit of a refresher on complex systems dynamics, right? You have internal feedback loops of inputs and outputs. And over time with this movement, there's this like tipping point. And there's almost like a breakthrough or a breakdown. And what happens as an output is a new and qualitatively different state. So this is the science, like within living systems. Like when you think about ecosystems and how ecosystems adapt and emerge and evolve through the seasons, they're working with this technology, and it's the science of complexity. And we can actually use the science of complexity in the systems that we work with. And I think like, again, there's already generally some knowledge of that in OD. And I think like large group interventions have always been built with complexity science. So with the emerging and the diverging and the converging and the bringing the whole system in the room with the diverse viewpoints and going through cycles of reflection and output, what happens on the third day? A new and qualitatively different state emerges, right? So this is why, like, because this is what my father did, and there was something about this emergent output that was magical, and like I witnessed it when I was 21 at Airbus, and I was like, whoa, like there's power here and there's magic here. And so I have always had this like innate understanding of complexity, but I never really compared it to ecosystems. I never really brought in like understanding of living systems. I had an understanding of systems, and that is what fundamentally was shifting for me and like what I was wanting to start to learn more about. And here's just another like nice visualization of this, is that like the living system on the right, this organization, right? It's alive, there's nodes, it's alive with exchange of information, communication, resources, knowledge, going through adaptive cycles of iteration. And that is how you create culture, right? Like that's showing culture. If I had to say how you create culture, like in a diagram, right? Like you see the multidimensionality. Then you also see the layers and the levels of depth in terms of like beliefs and mental models at an individual level, rippling up to an organizational level. And so it's just like so much more complex than this chart on the left, which is like, you know, trying to create order, putting order into a world that is just highly complex and changeable. So with an ecosystem, same exact thing, when you look at nature and you look at how the individual like organism ripples out into a population, into a community, and into an ecosystem. And all of these layers and levels are working with one another with the laws of living systems and the principles of living systems. What I also noticed with OD was that like we're doing a lot of like the human group org community stuff, a little bit of the trans org stuff. But there's always been a separation from like the bioregion and the local ecosystem and the community of place. Like some OD work might be nested more in community development, again, like Peter Block's stuff. But still a separation, still kind of a separation with like, you know, this like our local biosphere and like our local watershed. And in indigenous communities and populations, like that was always very, very interconnected. There was an animism to nature, and there was a respect and an honoring of nature, and kind of an understanding of our interconnectedness with nature. And so like we've gone so far from that like when I shared this presentation with my Pepperdine community a year or two ago, and like people were just like, I have no idea how to connect these two things. Like, how is this even relevant to my job in HR as a leader? You know, and like that's fair. And it shows us just how far we have drifted. And so what I've been doing is I have found the regenerative communities, like, so big part of it is like rooting in place and getting to know. I was doing work not in Seattle. And I started shifting that and saying, well, what responsibility do I have to my local community and my local ecosystem and my local place? And there's actually a lot of interesting organizing that's happening with bioregional regeneration and mobilizing like stewardship of different communities in the Cascadia region to give them resources and financial support to like help steward the land that they live on, right? So that's one example, not going to be relevant for everyone, but there's a certain level of consciousness that we can bring back into the room, I think, that has been lost, that just helps us be more intentional and thoughtful of like, what are we creating as an organization? Like, what type of change and impact are we creating as an organization right now? And like, what is our relationship with resource use? What is our relationship to giving back to the community? What is the relationship to centering underrepresented groups that have been left out of decision-making processes in the past? And just really starting to, just bring a higher level of consciousness to that. So for me, like, I feel like it's a turning point personally, in the sense that like we have a rich background of depth and of like academia and understanding of systems, understanding of people, and how do we carry this forward, and like how do we expand from human-centered to include place-based or ecologically centered. It's not one or the other. Like Steve and I were talking about this, like, well, what's the relationship between humanistic and living systems? Like what's nested in which one is nested in the other? And I kind of see them as like this kind of infinity loop of like they're both highly interdependent and interconnected, because it's like we're not letting go of the humanistic. We actually like need the humanistic to mobilize like our role in regenerating our ecosystems, in helping organizations think really thoughtfully about their footprint, in like, again, like natural disasters. Like in my bones, I feel as though when crisis hits, people are going to need to come together. They're going to need to process, leaders are going to need to align on what decisions do we need to make going forward. And like, that is a huge element of like the human dynamic and people and working with people. And so it's kind of combining these two together, and it's trying to bring them closer together. And like this could, like, it doesn't have to mean that you're working specifically on projects that have to do with nature, but you could be bringing living systems principles into a consulting project working on culture that is like helping to create conditions for a thriving culture. So it's like there's many ways that you can apply this idea of regeneration. You can be regenerating the culture, regenerating the human, regenerating the local ecosystem, regenerating the organization so it's more conscious around its strategy and its impact. And it's really up to like, where does it fit? Where does it fit for you? Because the science is the science, and the science is here to help you. Like the living systems principles are here to help you do your work because they work with the laws of complexity. And change management folks don't really, maybe they do. It's been a while since I've really been in change management world. Change management works with linearity. Change management works with like, I'm planning it and I can kind of like see it all. And like, it's actually much more complex and alive. And we have to know that we can't control and predict outcomes in complex adaptive systems, but we can create conditions and we can set a direction to create a positive ripple effect. So if you have change tools that are updated, and I'll talk about this in a second, but like frameworks are created with complexity science. Okay, they're not models. Models are made with linearity. Frameworks work with complexity. So if every system is a complex adaptive system, like how can you have change tools that allow you to work with the emergence and like the unknowns of complex adaptive systems? It positions you to do better change work, whether you're working on an ecologically focused project or not. So there's a big range here of like how you can apply this. And I want it to feel relevant to you. And I'll be done in just a second, and we'll go to a pause and a discussion. But just what does regenerative mean? So it means creating conditions conducive for life to continuously renew itself, to transcend into new forms, and to flourish amid ever-changing life conditions. So we are restoring what has been lost, right? When we're in degenerative systems, like where we are, those systems are degrading over time. And generally speaking, the dominant paradigm we've been working in has been a degenerative system in terms of extraction, in terms of air pollution, in terms of water quality, right? And like, we want to be able to, like a forest knows nothing to do but thrive if it's given the right conditions. It's creating like fresh air, new species are alive and well, there's a level of health. And so like, how do we bring that level of consciousness to creating that level of health in the organizations and the communities that we work in, also and at the individual level. And then regenerative systems change is adopting a living systems or regenerative approach to unleashing transformation and untapped potential in complex adaptive systems. So I'm taking this like regenerative approach to the systems level. I'm using living systems principles, and then I'm like working at a systems level, and that can be any level of system here, in terms of like team, organization, or network. And then the last thing, just to give you a better idea of like types of work for me, how this has shown up for me is that like I've talked a little bit about the process. So I'm using like complexity science and living systems principles, which are also regenerative design principles, in my change process to design my change interventions, to design my frameworks, to design a conversation for leaders to reflect on themselves. I'm putting a framework out there for them. I'm designing a large group intervention for them, a process for them. It's all built with complexity and mirrors nature. But then what am I applying it to? I'm working with companies that are like thinking about water and cleaning water, fibers to clean water at a national level. So we need water. All of those AI data centers need water, right? Waste systems, green energy. I've been doing some stuff. I just got a new project for a substance abuse organization. So it's like, it's not earth focused, but it is human focused on how are we creating conditions for these folks to come through this process to heal, to get hired, and then to like give back to their community. And that's a regenerative at the individual level and at the community level. Also I've done some homelessness projects. So these projects can show up in different ways, but we're using the complexity science to create a regenerative outcome in the direction of a regenerative future where we have a balanced relationship with energy and we have like a healthy relationship with our communities, in our communities where people are doing well and they're not suffering from addiction or homelessness. Because we're in this weird epidemic. I don't know about you, but in Seattle, like it is just like you look on the street sometimes and you're like, there are zombies out and about. And like, where have we come? So again, what is our role as change stewards to help shift and align for higher effectiveness? So I'm really passionate about this, and I know I'm a little verbose. So I'm going to pause, and I'd love for us to do maybe a little breakout, and we could also like talk as a group, but maybe we can decide. Maybe Steve, you can help me decide. I have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
What does being in service to life or a greater whole mean for you as an OD practitioner? And what is the deep calling that drives you into this field? How do you want it to show up in the work that you do?
Yeah, I like those two questions. I think we could easily go into breakouts, but I think we have, with the number of people we have here, we could probably each check in and have each person have a chance to share, if you like that, and then maybe react to their thoughts on this. And I would add maybe a third one. What's percolating for you as you're listening? What's, within what you're hearing, what's percolating up for you as a reflection or reaction or a question? Maybe we just do it that way since we have a nice, more intimate group here today.
That's great.
Okay, we can do that. And so what we do is have fun, do it the way where one person goes and they pick who goes next. And I think we should really pick on Bob. Bob should go first.
That's good, because Bob wanted to go first. Arielle, are you over in Seattle?
I am.
Cool. I'm in Spokane,
Oh, great.
and we need to have a longer conversation. So 2019, I was part of the group that was working with the Campfire in Paradise. And two of the other members of the team had also gone through Regenesis training. And a regenerative framing became a key part of the work in Paradise. In fact, several years later, from a larger Northern California wildfire perspective. One of our members started talking about the distinction between a replacement paradigm and a regenerative paradigm. And it's actually a framing that people have been able to pretty easily access. This has become a through line in all of our work at New Stories. Our new tagline as of last year is restoring for a regenerative future. And one of the things that we're launching this year is a regenerative responders learning community to help people be responders after disaster that are regenerative, not extractive, and not trying to build back what was, but to create what wants to be. So
Wow.
I totally love everything that you've said. We have to connect. I just want to endorse the work and the clarity of the work that you've done.
Wow. So this is wild because there's so many connections in this web that we don't always see, and I'm starting to see more of them. But the New Stories is alive in the field for me right now. I was at an event this weekend, and I'm meeting with Heather next in 2 weeks maybe. And then I was talking to my other friend Ben. We were at this gathering, and he was talking about Ben Browner. He was talking about New Stories. And
Oh yeah.
I think I'm like, that sounds familiar. And I'm like, wait, I'm meeting with them in 2 weeks. And now here you are. So yeah, there's so many things. Like, it's like the universe is working in our favor. We always have to remember that, like, sometimes it's conspiring for our greatest good. And there's so many rich, interconnected things that we don't always see. And so I just appreciate the synergy. And I would love to talk more with you. Yeah.
And I will, oh, Dave is sitting there looking Dave-like. I'll pass it to Dave.
Oh yeah. I don't know. That's the good part. I like the idea of the universe is working in our favor. So I'll stick with that. And we heard from Jillian.
For me, yeah, so I would say being in service to life or a greater whole means just going beyond myself and always helping others. That's the calling that drives me into the field, to help others to help themselves and help them grow, and support that in whatever way that I can. And so that is what drives me in this work. I would pick Jen.
I had a feeling you were going to do that. Oh gosh. I really am enjoying this very much. I think I'm, as a major lover of nature and all things being outside, I've always felt very connected that way, but have never thought about it from the perspective that you're presenting. And as somebody that's newer to OD, I'm in the doctoral program right now at BGSU, but and learning significant amounts. I think I'm just really intrigued right now about the interconnectedness of human development and systems development and system change alongside what ecological change looks like. And so I don't really know where I'm at. I'm just a lot of, as Steve said, percolating happening for me at this moment. So I will pass it on to Carol.
So my calling is to take the wisdom of the previous generations and infuse the younger generations. And Arielle and her father were examples, as Peter and Ed Schein were, in that group of people who would be, in my mind, coming together around that. You raise such wonderful memories about the Society for Organizational Learning. It was my base, and one of the missions was interdevelopment of individuals, organizations, and society and sustainability. And nobody understood what interdependent was. And now it's become, how many times in this talk did you use that language? So I'm really excited about the doors you're opening and want to go through them. And I'll call on Jim.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, so there's been a number of things already in here that just kind of like, oh, that makes so much sense. I work with ID Group with Mona Amadeo, and we do a lot of organization development and system change within government organizations. So some of the stuff like that one graph with the model versus a framework as a, linear versus a complex system just really resonates with a lot of the work we do, where we're trying to fit into these preordained hierarchies and stuff. We're trying to create culture change and image change and organization change, all within, we're a B Corp, so all within the world trying to create those triple bottom line outcomes. So yeah, a lot of this resonates, and the deep calling for me is trying to push for that sustainability and clean energy future here in the South for well over a decade, and it's always a complex system to try to get that change. How about I call on Mike? Have you gone yet?
Thank you. Love hearing everybody's answers here. I am an industrial organizational psychologist with loose ties to the org change program here, and so I feel like maybe I have some healing to do as well. I feel like my field does a lot of the isolating individuals and aspects of individuals, and the language I heard in your talk, Arielle, of living systems and letting people grow are things that I feel are not as commonly discussed. One of the things I just kept thinking about, I'm listening to a book by one of my heroes, Carl Rogers, and he had that real philosophy of just helping people find the strength inside themselves to make the changes they need. And one other thing I really liked about your talk is this acknowledgement of this destruction and deconstruction that's happening right now to things that many of us hold really dear and never expected to crumble so quickly. And you're urging us to treat this as a calling right now, that this is the time for us to step up and do work, is really resonating with me. I'll call on Teo.
Thanks, Mike. I have a lot of different things bouncing around in my head, so I'm going to just cycle around or draw a circle around maybe and pick up a ball from what Carol said around this idea of the interdependency. Like, the longer I'm doing this stuff, the more I find that when we're dependent, that holds great risk for communities and societies and marriages to fail. But interdependent is the only way that we make sense. We don't make sense on our own. We only make sense in community, in exchange, in resonance, in taking, giving, sharing. And I find that there is a lot of hope in realizing that that means that I am part of this big thing, part of nature. If I am part of that big thing, that's also sometimes scary, because maybe there are parts of that thing I don't want anything to do with, so I don't have to figure out how to align that and sort of accept those resonances as well. But yeah, just grateful, Arielle, for those many impulses. There's many more that I don't quite have words for just yet. Jackie, are you able to share with us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I found it very intriguing, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And I continue to comment. Today is no difference, and it's just fantastic to hear this different logic, thinking about all the different levels of system. And there are two things that I want to share that I found just as one audience particularly beneficial. And the first one is thinking about the expansion of stakeholders that you mentioned when we are thinking about how we define community and then the type of impact we have on community. And the second point that I found really beneficial and appreciate learning is when you talked about how to create condition for change rather than designate a destination of change. So I want to say that first, I appreciate learning about these. And I have 2 more questions to share and hopefully to help just really enjoy this conversation. Hopefully you find it helpful. And if not, that's okay. I just wanted to share. So the first is I'm actually really looking forward to hear about the regenerative principles, which is that maybe if you have time, you can share, or perhaps there's a slide that I can look at later and to learn from. Because I find myself thinking about which change, how's the change process going to be different? And thinking about the theories of change you already knew, the classic theories or Lewin theories, how would this reformat these steps and processes? So I'm sure you've probably addressed that in the regenerative principle. So this is one thing that I found curious about. And then the second question is in relation to my own research area. I am doing research creativity and innovation. So when you're talking about regenerating, that makes me wonder, so how does that connect to creativity and innovation, both at individual level and team and organization level? So I just want to offer these points. And this is very interesting. And thanks for allowing me to join.
Do we hear from everybody?
I think we have not heard from Kim. There we go.
Probably because you probably haven't seen me. I get all the emails from Steve, and Steve and I talk here and there, and I've been in this organization for a long time. I'm retired. I've been in the industry for over 35 years, and I have taught part-time at the university, several universities, DePaul University and Whitewater. Right now, it's really wild that you're talking about this, Arielle, because I've been in the entrepreneur world now because I'm basically giving back the gift of my knowledge back to the executives who brought me in to do transformation efforts in corporations. And I'm building platforms and organizations being visibility thing. So I'm going to answer your questions first, but I wanted to let you know who I am because many of you probably wonder, who the heck is Kim? So you asked the question number 1. So being in service to life means I'm here to build systems that give back more than they take, to design containers where people do not just succeed, but they regenerate. And as a practitioner, basically I've been a change management practitioner for 35 years. So I'm more of a practitioner, but I also have the education like you too. So I do both. I do research as well as applying. And I don't just optimize workflows, I cultivate the ecosystems. I believe organizations should be living organisms, adaptive, interdependent, and life-giving. Everything I design is relationship and connector building, but I leverage systems in the back seat. So they basically help us. They are not driving our life. So they empower us, give us freedom, right? The second question you asked, and I'm going to answer it. The deep call is to restore wholeness through connection, to help people stop chasing and start resonating. I can talk more about this with you offline. The last thing you asked was what's percolating. So what's bubbling in my space is we as a community, this is a global community, as human beings are not just building businesses, we're building new systems of belonging. Systems where people don't just make it, they matter. Where visibility isn't about ego, but about serving at scale, where monetization isn't manipulation, it's meaningful in exchange. And I'm telling you why I say this, because I transitioned out of corporate world and retired at an early age. I'm young. And well, now I'm, people could say I'm old. We could all argue about my age. But for 2 years, I taught yoga And then I all of a sudden was asked by Cornell University to speak on their TEDx stage because I'm a computer scientist by trade, but I transitioned into human centric because there was all this change that need to happen and systems got in the way, right? I started in the 80s when the wave was happening, right? Many of us probably did. And what last year happened was I actually said, okay, I'm going to go. My power was actually talking about the pause, PAUSE. And the reason why is because the systems, we needed to pause from the systems, right? And I was talking about that on stage for 150 stages last year. But while I did that, I got into that arena of the silver, or what do you call it? The shiny object syndrome. And I got in with these coaches that would charge a lot of money and give you no value. Now, this is very different than our arena, right? Our education system, where we're teaching to learn, and so people can take all this wonderful value and then apply it in their lives and go. Well, I got in that arena for a year, and so I learned that, right? There's all this other stuff, this obtuse stuff that's happening over there that it's manipulative. And I didn't want that. I didn't want that. So what I do is I basically bring cohesion together. I'm saying all that because what you shared is very aligned, and across the board in the entrepreneur world, there's a lot of people saying what you just said, not from your research perspective, but from this, whatever it is. They talk about the earth shifting and all kinds of crazy stuff comes my way, right? So that's my answer. I hope that kind of makes sense to you, but it really resonated with me with what you said. Thank you.
Great. Thank
Well,
you.
yeah. Thanks, Kim. Yeah, so I'll just give a couple comments, and then Arielle, if you could say goodbye with some of your parting comments that you'd want us to reflect on. I was really struck by a word, extraction. That really struck me kind of very hard. And when I think of extraction, the way it's described, it's like we extract a dentist will extract a tooth that's infected or needs to be extracted to save a person's life or to alleviate pain, right? So there's an appropriate time and place for maybe extraction. But then I think of like when we extract from the earth, it's kind of like I'm going over and I'm taking all of Mike's blood and I'm extracting his blood from him, or I'm extracting his energy, or I'm extracting things from him that he needs. And I'm not doing it in a way because I don't know if that's necessary. So there is extraction in unnecessary ways and so forth. So when I think of that, I think that just struck me. And then the second thing is in terms of like what this life-giving nature of regenerative, I just think about the fact that we are right now entering an era where we're going to have to become quintessentially human because AI is going to put us in a position to really take away all of these things that's going to leave us left with what is our value. And I think that's what this notion of living systems gets at. Our value is in our ability to regenerate and generate living systems in healthy ways. It's going to require a whole new skill set. I think it's just going to require us to be fully human in ways that we haven't been for the last several hundred years. So that's some of my general reactions. I'm excited by it, but I think it's a real opportunity, but it's going to be a tough challenge to figure out, but I think we need to and will. So thank you, Arielle. Great, provocative, awesome, all those kinds of cool words. What's your final parting words for us, your reactions? And
yeah, so I'm gonna leave you with a one thing that you can just take a screenshot of, because I heard that Jackie said she wanted to see the regenerative design principles. So I'm also going to put in the chat a link to my website, which has a white paper on regenerative leadership. And that goes into, it's more of like an organizationally focused, I wrote it in 2020, but it's got a lot of good stuff in it. It's got the principles explained in it, and it's got a framework that I have been starting to play around with in terms of what's the change formula. Again, really, really good questions. And yeah, there's also, I will just share for those who want to know more. I want to leave you with some resources so you can do a little bit of research yourself and see where you might be called. So there's lots of books you can read. There's also lots of communities of practice out there. And so feel free to take a screenshot of this page as well. I can make sure I get the slides over to Steve and Carol and Jillian and friends to share back out. But happy to talk with anyone. Like if you want, I'll also put my email. Conscious Transformation Agents is my consulting practice. And yeah, super passionate about this work. And I love the resonance. I think my reflection from hearing you all is that there's resonance in the field already. So that's great. And yeah, it just makes me feel like our field, OD field, like we are always going to be evolving and adapting, but we have such a rich lineage that is needed going forward. And I see that adaptation and iteration thought process happening in the field of OD, and it's validated just by talking to all of you today. So super grateful for the time and opportunity to share.
Thanks, Arielle. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.